Hi, everyone. Welcome to our occasional writing workshop that's generative, that also has some advice on how you're going to conduct your classes. I want to talk to everybody here also about, I kind of need to shift the schedule because I'm going to be out of town. Instead of 2 weeks from now, I'll be out of town, and then 2 weeks from then I'll be out of town. So I'd like to run one next weekend on the 13th, which I know is Mother's Day, and I realize not everybody can make it around then. And then on the 27th. So I'm just doing that to you. And if you can't make it, I record. All right. So everybody in 532, this week we are discussing where in the world, because of course it is an intensive study in place and setting. So this is talking about setting again. And the location of the world will impact what happens to your character. And something I've been emphasizing for everybody, 529, 532, is that comment. I think Sarah, you were there, maybe Randall, for my brother's author talk for everybody. And when he said plot only matters in so much as it impacts characters we care about, he said something like that. That's everything we're doing, really. The setting is going to impact your character and it will impact your plot, and it only matters in the ways that we become more invested in what happens to your character. And so, it doesn't matter if you have the most interesting plot in the world. If you haven't gotten us invested in your character, you're not going to get us all the way through the story, most likely. So that setting often will have much to do with a physical setting that we're familiar with. If you're in a spice market in Thailand, that's going to be different than being at the farmer's market down in Okanagan, right? And in this case, I want to emphasize, though, that setting also is like an emotional state. It could be cultural context. It could be time period. So setting can go beyond just what your character can just touch or feel or smell or taste or see. And I was going to say about the last one, you are writing about a character who misplaces or loses something tangible or not, or someone. And in this, so for people who are doing prose, it's 800 to 1,000 words, 12 lines of poetry, or 4 to 6 pages of script. In this, setting is supposed to be an important part of that, but keep in mind that setting could be, their emotional setting of having lost something, or the historical setting of when this is happening. So lots of ideas about that. And this applies to 529 as well, because in all your future milestones, that setting grade is going to be half of it's on physical description, but the other half is on sensory description. And not just physical description, but it's setting description. So it can be, just as I said, physical, emotional, cultural, missing some of what they can. So everything I'm saying for 532 does apply to 529. Okay, and then I am trying to get to the right 529. And then, okay, so I'm so excited because this week in 529, you're doing your first full draft of your story. And this is what's so great. I want to emphasize, it's a full draft. Don't think it's your chance to draft partway through. The course has designed it for you to have a complete story this first time, and then you get to revise the complete story several times. So write the whole thing. It's hard on your grade if you don't. And in this one, it's just a reminder that they're emphasizing elements of fiction, narrative arc setting, and dialogue. Dialogue is something you're pushing into. And there's some tips in the article, 7 keys to writing good dialogue. And I think the most important thing, well, I don't know. I don't want to say it all. Sarah, Suzanne, Elisa, Randall, because you've all taken 529, what would you say are the most important things about dialogue?
No adverbs.
Yeah. Rare
or tags. Yeah.
No is like absolutes are have no place in writing, but sparing, right?
No everyday like words that we add in, like and like things that we say, but when you read, You don't actually, if you read dialogue, they're not there.
Right,
There's a lot-
unless they are an important characterization.
Right.
So if you're trying to show a teenager who can't speak without every other word being like, you might do it for a couple of lines of dialogue, but then you'd also have to back off because think how annoying that would be, right? Good one. All right, who else?
Dialogue has to move the plot forward, but it also needs to feel realistic. So cut out the pleasantries. And another thing is be very careful with accents. If you're trying to emphasize an accent in the way you're writing, it can make the reading very tedious.
Yes, so if you have a dialect happening so that people can hear, you know, what the person speaks like, again, a little bit of that will go a long way and your reader will fill in the rest in the other words. But you know, trying to write the whole thing, say you're trying to write about somebody who lives in, you know, a deep ghetto somewhere, you know, across the world, and they speak in like a pidgin of the language, your reader's going to stop reading rather than struggle through all of that pidgin speak.
And also, this is from not from the class, but from reading. If you're going to do alienish, whether it's Elvish, Klingon, or your own thing, keep a dictionary, because there've been
Yes.
things you've read where, you know, gobbledygook means something one place and then you're meaning it something else because you've forgotten you've invented that word
Yes.
before.
Yes, that's a good one. And finally, I want to emphasize dialogue tags, which really going beyond kind of he said, she said is unnecessary. Instead of trying to say she eloquently spooled out, you could say, she said as she stroked the silk material between her fingers, and that action is going to tell you what kind of dialogue is happening. Or the action can place your reader more deeply in setting, or the action can characterize your character more. You can use action beats. You can have them talking back and forth between people. What are some things I'm forgetting, y'all, that you can use in dialogue that are like that? Anything else? It's two major things. It's action beats and one other, and I'm losing what that is.
I know, I just know that I got for me, the dialogue tags, because at a previous class, they'd given us a page, or maybe it was 2 pages of synonyms for said and asked, and said, don't use said and ask, use all these synonym instead.
That was bad advice.
Yeah. It's hard to break though.
Yeah. I had the great fortune of working with David Gates when I was at the Bennington Writing Seminars, and in 1994, his novel, whose name I've forgotten, was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in America that year. And so to say he knows writing, that's his credibility, right? He knows writing. And he didn't even want me to use asked. He wanted only he said, she said.
Oh,
And
wow.
I didn't get sophisticated enough to figure out, and you can use asked. I mean, I'm just saying that he's one of those literary guys. And what he was pushing me towards without saying was, you could put in an action beat instead. You could, you know, have something that meant asked without using the word. And so I just want to encourage you, it's tough and important to have dialogue be simple. Hi, how are you? Fine, how are you? Has no place in any creative writing unless it's somehow driving the dialogue forward. I mean the story forward. I'm currently reading, based on one of my best friend's recommendations, the 2 books that go with A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine, which is a science fiction set of books. And it's so pushing on how we use language, the formality of language, how we use body language. And the book is about that, but it's so fascinating as a writing act to watch the way Arkady Martine brings it in, because it also kind of is a lesson on how to write well, because those same body language things matter when we're talking about writing. So, I mean, because I bring this up only to say that Justin, what I was reading right before I came in here, because I read by audio and I took a shower, whatever. So what I was reading, there was a hi, how are you in there, but it was because it utterly characterized a moment when 2 people who had never met each other before, and the format that they did it in made a difference to the entire book, right? So there's a place for it. It's just that it has to have meaning, right? We've talked way too long. We are so short on writing time, right? So any questions for me about what's going on in your classes or anything about writing or anything you want to say?
Mhm.
For
Just
Suzanne,
a warning that 550, ENG 550 is really, really hard, especially after you take it after not an easy, but a fun class like 529.
I taught 550 for, I don't know, way too long before I just begged to teach something else because it's not literature and it's not creative writing, but it's really important. So I think it's great that you have to take it, but it's about linguistics and how language works. And there's only one lesson in there where I'm like, no, just read this one part of the chapter. But everything else, Anne Curzan wrote the textbook for it, and she came and talked to us at the Air Force Academy when I used to teach in person there, and she's amazing. She was the advisor on one of our newer teachers' dissertation committee, and she's just great. And she's one of the ones that led the charge to bring in they as a reference to be an ungendered reference, and that was in 2017, 2016. So she's great. She's just fantastic. Just trust her.
The book is I've never done a formal education in English. I grew up in Israel. The book is very dense. And just this week, when there's people who haven't heard of Hamlet and haven't heard of Yoda, and that just really
Yeah, that blows my mind. I think it's chapter 5 that gets weird, but there's an infographic, not chapter 5, but module 5, I think. And there's an infographic that explains everything.
Right.
All right, anybody else? Okay, lumps. To disappoint Sarah, Suzanne, Randall, and possibly Elisa, since you're in your second round of us doing this, I have something utterly new today. Something I've never done with you all before. Normally, I'd probably do the improv, throw a word out to you, but I'm going to do that in a future one. I'm trying to get Kelly, the person who I got that from, who's my cohort mate from the Bennington writing seminars. I was just talking with her 2 days ago to say, why don't you come back and do it again for my students? I think she might. So we're holding off, have her do it since she's the original improv person. She always does it better than me because she remembers how to do the second part. So this time, all right, I'm going to throw this. It's a very short flash. Some people might read it as a poem. I don't think it's a poem because it was in 50-word stories is where I got it. You guys find that in your chat? Do you, does anybody else want to read it or do you want me to read it?
I love the title.
Yeah.
After fighting all week with 2 out of my 3. I love it.
Yeah. So the title is I Don't Want Kids, she told me. Took me 3 winters to finally get over you. And there you are in line at 40 flavors, lickety split. I'd know that red braid anywhere. Someone shifts their weight and a cherub comes into view. He's riding your hip. I'm a cardboard bucket, my inside scraped out with a spoon. Is that a complete story in your minds?
Yes.
Why?
For me, it's because I lost my first child. So I understand that scraped out feeling. It's been 27 years since it died, and the day doesn't go by. And I'm going through this issue where my daughter got married and has moved off to his side. And
yeah.
So for me, every paragraph is something. So the first one is, when we bumped into our daughter at QFC at the supermarket, and second one, my daughter actually is pregnant. So I can see, for me, those are all full, each paragraph is a story.
So Lisa's giving us a great example of what happens with Flash, because we always bring, as everybody here except Patricia has heard, we always bring our contingent reality, the reality that is contingent on our past to this present moment. And we fill in gaps that might be there, things that as authors we can't anticipate. We fill them in and make the story meaningful to us. So yes, for Elisa, it's a complete story. What briefly would, let's look at narrative arc. What makes a complete story with narrative arc?
I think like the first stanza or paragraph like introduces at least two characters, and then you got the rising, like he or she sees the other person, and then the climax, he ends up seeing that there's a kid, and then the denouement, or I don't know how to say that word, coming down is the change in the character.
Yeah, so to back up even more simply, exactly what you said, sir. I agree with you completely. A complete story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it begins, she introduces us to the character and the two characters and helps us understand what the conflict is in the story. And then it rapidly, rises to the moment when at the climax, there's a child. So from the story, we don't know this. So how important is the title to this story?
Super important.
It's everything, right, Suzanne? Yeah.
Yes.
So when you're writing a story, your title really matters. When you're writing a 50-word story, it's inevitably part of the story, right?
I just got it. When you focused on the title, I just understood what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know about the rest of you, but for the first, I want to say 35 years of me reading, I barely noticed a title. I would never read forewords or prefaces. I wanted to get to the story. And I have since learned that it's pretty important to do all the extraneous material because it's meaningful. There's a reason it's there, including the title, which I would skip right over. In this case, you can't see it very well because of the way it popped into the chat. It's more prominent. I have it like in bold and everything on the Word document. Randall, did you want to add anything about this story? I don't want to leave you out.
I kind of had I guess my reading may have been just a touch different than that, but I kind of saw it as, I don't want kids, she told me, is actually not the narrator, but that's coming from the person that she sees. Because to me, when I saw the red braid, I just thought a guy with long hair. This is, she told him she didn't want kids, and now she sees him with kids, and it's causing her to experience this emotional response.
Oh, what an interesting perspective. And here's a couple things that I would love to talk about with that, and stop me if you disagree, but I love a reader's assumption of gender, that the two characters would be in a hetero relationship because there's a child involved, right? And the wanting or not wanting children seems like a fairly simple conversation to have in that kind of a relationship. The author's name is Shoshana Shai, so we sort of make assumptions that that's probably somebody who's gendered as a woman, maybe. And then there's this long red braid, and possibly a man with long hair, possibly her partner from before as a woman with long hair. And the decision to have a child, that, especially if they are a lesbian couple, that's also another huge thing, right?
Right.
And either of them could have them if it was a lesbian couple. So that's also a question. Like, I'm a cardboard bucket, my inside scraped out with a spoon. I was having a conversation about this poem or short story with a bunch of people, and some people read it as like an abortion style story. What happens when you're scraped out, your insides are scraped out with a spoon. Or it can be emotion. It can be how you feel, that hollowed out feeling when a future you wanted and they didn't want turns out to be they did want, but just not with you. Intimately familiar with. So there's so many interpretations, right? In 50 words. Well,
Mm.
you want to be technical when you say it's like 57 words, but they don't count the title towards the word count. So I'll just say also, when you're unhappy with me that I make you stick to word counts, look what you can do. Right? And your titles don't count towards your word count either.
I have like a 30-word title.
You know, I mean, so you laugh, but I have seen in some of these 100-word and 50-word stories, I'll see like a 12-word title. They take advantage of it. Or there'll be a 2-word title. I entered a 100-word competition thing for New York City midnight. They were doing a micro. They have a bunch of their fast writing competition things. And my story, my title isn't part of my story other than to illustrate what's coming, you know. So it depends on what you want. Okay, so I have a prompt for you. I will toss up the prompt. We will kind of look at it, give you time to warm up in your head, and then I'm going to ask you to write for 6 minutes. So mentally prepare yourself for that. And Patricia, I don't think you were here last time. I recommend you try to handwrite if you can, because it engages both hemispheres of your brain, but it's fine if you type. I mean, you know.
I did watch the recording
Oh, okay,
afterwards.
great.
So
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so the prompt is sensory details can thrust us back in time. This is something that we've been thinking about in 532. Think of a moment when a flash of color, the brief scent of a memory, the notes of a favorite song, something took you back to an important moment. Write about the space between where the sense threw you into a memory and the moment you remember. What do you feel? You know, are you happy? Are you betrayed? Nostalgic? Write something and we'll find out what you get. Okay. All right, everybody, on your marks, get set, write. Gosh, I forgot to tell you that you had a minute left and instead we're out of time. So as you can gently wrap it up, please wrap it up. It's what I get for eating my breakfast in the break. Sorry. I muted you all just because there were some writing sounds. So if you want to say anything, you've been muted and you'll have to unmute yourself. How did it go?
I'll go.
Okay, did it go well?
Mhm.
Okay, go ahead and read. Thanks.
Driving into town, Cassie gawked at the milk cows peppering the field. Cracking the window a bit, she was hit with the stink, a stink that gave her warm fuzzies. Remembering in elementary school field trips, the yellow bus, windows down, the country air of cow pies, and the image of lifted tails, all the kids in unison yelling ew, whether they liked each other or not. Then later on being in the backseat of a maroon minivan teaching her 20-month-old foster brother how to say cow. He mimicked after 3 examples. Years later, she ran into him by chance and he said cow and laughed before he even said hello. When Cassie got to her destination, she immediately called her childhood best friend to share how excited she was to smell cow shit in the state of Texas.
It's great. What stood out for you all?
What?
I love the stink gave her warm and fuzzies. That's perfect. It's fabulous.
Thank you.
I really like the connection, like having that good feeling, like just like that cute moment of like teaching a little kiddo how to say like a word, and then like that first like going back later more in the future time of like him just like immediately going cow, oh hello. It was just, I love that.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I like how one moment that seems meaningless can last a lifetime in our memories.
Yes. And really unexpected, right? How a smell that is universally considered unpleasant still can bring in pleasant memories. And particularly for those of us who know Cassie's backstory, that's perfect, you know, because she's a really complicated character. I agree with Suzanne, you know, and this is a very like flash length something, and yet, you know, you bring in the detail about this child knowing that their first connection is the word cow. So almost, and not in an unpleasant way, he's associating Cassie with cow, you know, like cow means 2 things for him. It means cows and Cassie. And so those little details really made the story come alive. It was great. I hope you're pleased with what you got. All right. Well, who wants to follow that?
Sure, I'll go.
Okay.
Walking past the shoe store, I saw them. Turquoise blue shoes, pointed toes, faux gold buckles. I stopped in my tracks. I was back there, so happy, so full of love and joy and romance, euphoric with the first flush of teenage love. I know a stupid smile burst on my face. I could feel my cheeks burn. My heart skipped a beat or 5. I was back on the stairs going down Yamin Moshe on the way home with Russ. He had stolen my shoes to keep the date a few minutes longer. We repeated the movement so many times over the last 36 years. Anytime I needed to leave and he wanted me to stay, even if it was just to go to the grocery store. Moments went by as I snored gawping at the storefront window. Milliseconds of reality, but hours of imagination. Unconsciously, I reached out, opened the store door, and stepped back into love and hope, an unknown, unclouded future.
What do you all think?
I like the unknown and unclouded part because, you know, so much of what we think we remember is clouded in so many ways. And I think you really captured that idea of like the nostalgic feeling that we have for love that at the time was miserable and complicated, but we don't remember it that way.
Right. Nice.
Thank you.
I didn't get a chance to write the whole thing down because I had to wanted to not miss anything, but your line euphoric, and then there was a couple other F sounds. I thought did a great job of that alliteration technique. And I like how it's kind of almost like a circle of life story to me.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times our nows go back to our past and kind of form our now. And you did that awesome with the shoes.
Thank you.
I really, really liked how you said like the milliseconds of reality. And I didn't get like the whole quote, but like the milliseconds of reality was like the hours of imagination. Like that like feeling of like just how like it takes you out for like a quick second, but you have all these feelings. I really love that and how it like tied into your whole story.
Thank you.
Anything to add, Patricia?
No, I guess I was trying to follow the story, and I'd really like to see it written out.
Yes.
Sometimes it takes me a little bit more time to process.
Yeah, this becomes the longer that you come, the easier it becomes to pick up what you want to talk about. But it's hard. It's very difficult in your first oral ones. You can just be like, wow, that was great. And that's fine.
I'm not used to this format, so
No. And in fact, for me also, similarly, when I started listening to audiobooks, I actually had to go back and pick books I knew and had read. I used the Harry Potter series because Jim Dale is amazing as a narrator, and just had to practice listening to books. And now it's almost all I do because I read, I grade all day and I edit people's work. And so I almost exclusively listen to audiobooks. I'll just say that I can listen and pick up on a lot, but everything I would have said about Elisa's, everybody else said. My favorite was Suzanne's as well. That idea that for just a split second you're gone, but in your head it's almost been a lifetime, because you just flash through 36 years of this guy stealing your shoes because he loves you and wants you to stay.
Yep.
So fantastic. Yeah. I think you should really consider polishing that up and looking at Flash Places, because
Okay. Thank you.
it's a complete story, and it's nostalgia in a way that acknowledges that nostalgia has problems, which is good.
Thank you. It's actually we met 36 years ago next week.
Nice.
He feels so old to say that.
Well,
You
many
could
of us.
even, have you ever seen, I think there's something on Hulu right now about like how America has made history based on food.
Okay.
You could almost turn that into like your marriage or relationship history by like different pairs of shoes that you've attached to throughout the years.
You could have a cycle of stories that has to do with shoes.
Or I could just say it based on, which hummus and falafel store we went to, because that's all we could afford at the time.
Right,
Yep.
but not food, shoes. That would be unique. I don't know many people who are writing as shoes as the basis. Such a great idea.
Yep.
Somebody tell me that you can't tell me what shoes you were wearing to an important event 20 years ago. I bet you can.
Yep.
I can
Okay.
tell you which shoes I was running in Korea in 2003. Right? So that's
I
funny.
remember wearing Sorel winter boots in Colorado when I was 11. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just,
And so if you can remember your shoes, it's probably tied to something that's worth writing about.
Okay.
I'm guessing. I think I could. I love the idea, Sarah. That's awesome.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, who'd like to go next?
I can go next. I always get criticized for going last. So
Good, Randall. Way to jump in there.
a flash of antiseptic, and I'm being waterboarded once more. Not to find the whereabouts of a notorious killer or to give coordinates of the next drone strike. No, my crimes are much simpler. I'm 4, and I committed the mortal sin of being careless. Everything's bigger in the eyes of a child, and the needle coming for my chin is the spear that the miserable old bastard Ahab cast through the white well. The target isn't scarred blubber, but the tender meat and bone of my chin, split in two by the innocent slip of socked toddler feet on polished bowling alley floors. The miserable old bastard's aim is true. The well blows in agony, and the child screams. Moby Dick had the depths of the ocean to hide, a haven for his rest. My haven had been denied. I was tied to the table, and the safety of my mother's arms were closed to me, folded in nervous tension, trusting the doctor knew best. The cold, dark cloth was wet on my face. The well is at home in the wet blackness. I was alone and lost. The whiff of antiseptic passes.
Mm.
I want to jump in and say everything because I want everybody else to have their chance to talk first, but I have so many questions. Okay.
I love the repetitions. Like they just really, you know, they're really strong, but I want to know why what was going on. It left me, all your writing always makes me want to know what's going on next time. Why is this happening? What's he, you know, I could see this from so many different ways, whether he was actually being tortured, or it sounds like someone waiting for, you know, a surgery or in a doctor's office and they're coming at you. Like there's so many ways to take this, you know, but I know it's got to fit in with your story, but it's amazing. And your voice, Randall, like you're the next Earl James Jones, like go narrate something.
This one was separated from my story. This was actually a true story from when I was a kid. So it's not with my normal stuff. So
Yeah, this is memoir.
Randall, this was so good. I really loved all the juxtaposition of like going like back and forth and like the antiseptic to like waterboarded. You're just drawn in like when you said the word innocent and then it was just like, oh yeah, just like this little kid who needs stitches on the chin. I just really love the juxtaposition between something like so horrible, but something that was so horrible for this kiddo at the time. It was just so good.
Do you have anything to add, Sarah or Patricia?
The waterboarding right away gives the image of torturing prisoners of war, and to have that image connected with a little boy hurting his chin and getting stitches was powerful. And the antiseptic, when you reach the end, antiseptic just stayed there, like you would always smell that after that, painting such a vivid picture.
I had a hard time telling what was happening. That's why I'm not really commenting a whole lot. Randall, when you write so much in so little that it's almost impossible for me to listen and then just get feedback without seeing it, like Patricia had talked about. But because one part I thought, like, is he being born? I couldn't tell exactly, but yeah, I can just say I feel like it's really rich. It's just I need more.
no, I understand that. As I'm reading it back, often I realize my stuff's easier to write than to read or listen to. I feel like so.
Well, there's nothing wrong with having a piece that needs reading. I mean, oral is not the typical form that we give. So it needs, you know, physical reading, because I got the impression that what we had was an adult writing about his toddler self splitting his chin open at the bowling alley, and that the experience of being stitched back together at the doctor's office was epic. So epic that the only comparison that would work is Moby Dick and Ahab and the white whale, you know? And so I think to imagine the struggle of the toddler at that scale is pretty awesome. And that's why I think it's so rich, this piece is. And my questions are more like, why? Okay. I guess you said did you say antiseptic or anesthesia?
Antiseptic.
Yeah, so has he not been numbed? He's tied to the table. I mean, I have so many questions that don't need to be answered in this. I just love that you made me like kind of bristle for this kid. And the mom is all wrapped up and upset. And I mean, because this is hard, but also that sense that a doctor might manhandle a kid back in whatever day this is to make the stitches happen. I mean, was there a reason he couldn't have been sedated or, at least number?
My thing is now I'm gonna have to like reach out to my son because when he was 4, he was tied, he bit his tongue in half jumping off a bunk bed while talking, and they had to tie him onto a papoose, like they tied his head and his chin and they yanked out it was awful. A
Yeah,
lot of everywhere. It was horrible. But now because of Randall, I'm like, oh my God, he's 25, is he still having trauma from this?
I'll have to
Well,
ask him.
I can't speak for him, but I can say that was one of the most traumatic things I ever experienced in my life because it's like what you're describing. The doctor didn't speak to me. He tied me down. And to answer the anesthesia question, no, he didn't numb me. Even he stitched me with no
Oh my
numbing
God.
agent whatsoever. So yeah, it was
How old were you?
interesting.
How old were you?
I was 4.
Oh my God. Yeah.
It's one of my first memories.
Yeah, because you're not going to lose that one.
No.
Nice. And waterboarding, of course, was a perfect example to go with it too, because it's
Yep.
literally torture. Yeah. All right. Well, on that cheerful note, who would like to go next?
I can go next real quick. The metal was cold beneath my fingers, and letting it fall back burned a hole through my chest. I couldn't remember her face. She felt like a figment of my imagination, only appearing when she needed to. The symbol was everywhere, though, in paintings, the carpet, carved into the side of the vanity. How could this be, though? The necklace was home, a long forgotten time of staying up late to read. Was she even real? A ghost can give a necklace, but maybe just a ghost of my past could. My stomach was unsettled, throwing itself like a toddler throwing toys. Why did I come here? And how did I get this necklace?
Ooh. Is this tied into your other work?
I am trying to figure out my homework for tomorrow. Due tomorrow.
And what class is this for then?
It's for 533 genres. And so I'm trying to write a horror story.
Ooh. It had that feel. It had like that darkness with the symbols, but I won't jump in front of everybody else. What do y'all think?
Thank you.
I think it made me feel like her thinking, like, the way you said that I think you used the word unconsciously a few times, like, this shit is happening, but I don't know how. So I like that. I'm big on word repetitions this week, having heard Yoda, so like that's my I like it.
Thank you.
At the beginning, I don't know if I missed it or didn't understand. Like, did she have a necklace on and she doesn't know where she got it from?
Sure does.
Okay. I'm curious where you would go with it. Like thinking about your assignment. Like, is it going to be a romance thing with horror or something else?
I think there's something else.
Yeah, the brief question I have, isn't the symbol she's seeing on the necklace also? Is that, am I?
It just cut out. Were you saying like, was she like seeing it everywhere, other places besides just the necklace?
Yeah, so the symbol she's seen
Correct.
everywhere is also on her necklace, suggesting that some
Yeah.
creepy being controls her.
Yeah.
I'm afraid.
I think if you are approaching it from a horror standpoint, there are a lot of directions you can go from there too, because it gives you options for like not only an untrustworthy narrator, but also does she even trust herself? And it can get into that existential type of horror where, you know, even the narrator doesn't really understand what's going on.
Which is exactly what I was going for. So it's perfect.
Mm.
You have anything to add, Patricia? It's okay if you don't. I mean, I just don't.
No, not this, not on this.
No problem. Yeah, so Suzanne, definitely so much potential. I feel like, I don't know how much space you have to write for this class, but you definitely have a start of something. And I agree with Randall in that the narrator has a real potential for being unreliable. And you have even the open possibility of something like Rosemary's Baby or whatever, where maybe she's involved in ways that she doesn't know, or, you know, maybe she's carving the symbols, but she doesn't know it. She could be crazy. I mean, there's all kinds of fun stuff you could do with that. So, you know,
She
maybe
can have like a different life when she's sleeping.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But the necklace maybe is her necklace, and then she's carving the symbol unknowingly or something. I don't know, all kinds of things. It sounds terrifying. Thanks. Somebody writes horror every term, and I stopped reading horror. Oh, somewhere around Pet Cemetery. That's when I just couldn't take it anymore. It was just so terrifying. And now I have to read it all the time. And but good for me. Good for me. Patricia, if you want to read what you got, that's fine. If you don't want to, that's also fine. I don't want to put any pressure on you.
I'm okay with it. It jumps around. I'm
Yeah.
not as organized as everybody else in doing this. So I started, when I finally thought of a memory, I started writing about the memory, but not what triggered it. So I kind of jumped back and forth.
Okay. If
So
you wrote, then we've achieved what we wanted today. It doesn't have to be organized or anything. Writing is the goal.
oh, so just read it the way I wrote it?
Sure. Or however you want to read it, go for it. We're here
Okay.
for you.
So I'm going to start in the middle then, and then I'll go back to the memory.
Okay.
So I heard a new conversation that I knew I'd heard the exact spoken words, although I hadn't heard it before. I remember when I was little, 5 or 7 years old, I visited someplace with my mom. And when I walked in the door, I knew I'd been there before. And I said, I've been here before. My mom insisted that I'd never been there, but for some reason I was so obnoxious about it that I knew I had been there before. So, and it's like there's a plant up in the corner of the hallway. I marched upstairs to point out where the plant was because I remembered where there was a plant in a corner in the hallway. And it wasn't there, but the owner of the house said that she just moved the plant the week before. So when I heard this conversation and I remembered that I'd heard it before, I remembered about when I was little, and my whole adult life, and this is not written, I'm just sharing the rest of the story because that's as far as I got. My whole adult life, I didn't notice my surroundings. It's like my mom she was so upset with me after I was made that scene, and we got out in the car and she said, don't ever do that to me again. And I said, I've been there before. And she said, no, you haven't. But anyway, I stopped noticing my surroundings. And I went through my whole adult life not noticing my surroundings. And then I become a writer and I have to start noticing my surroundings.
I
So
think the
I
rest
lost
of
a lot
that
of,
story is worth writing. You know, the impact of that moment on the rest of your life.
yeah, it really did. And so now I'm learning to notice things again.
That's
But
fantastic.
I mean, there's just sometimes something happens and you have this deja vu, even though you know it never happened, but it's like you got a fourth sight of something. And then years later it happens but I stopped noticing my surroundings. So that's it.
Thoughts from people. How can she capitalize
I
on
think
this?
it'd be yeah, I was thinking like writing it from like keeping that kid perspective of like noticing everything, and then as your story goes on, you get less and less detail, but then as you hit that like realization of like that point, like that turning point, then you start like seeing more and then branching back out and describing more things. That could be like a fun thing potentially.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the hourglass story.
Yeah.
I think actually, if you keep it as disjointed as it is now, it actually really plays on that theme of memory. So like, we all have memories and some of them are true, some of them are false. It goes back, but our memories aren't linear, I think is the word. It doesn't, they jump around, they bounce around in our mind. And I think that's what this read like. It's like, there's something, but you're not quite sure how it worked. And I think if you actually like tighten it up a little bit, but if you keep that voice of confusion, it actually really is a good piece. I know I'm not saying this well, but it's much more real that things are vague than that you remember them exactly as they were. And I think you didn't mean to, but you did capture that concept in your writing.
I'll agree with what she was saying, especially in regards to you didn't really insist that your version of the memory was correct. You just relayed it to us and kind of left it in that vague, ambiguous way. And that jumping around thing can be, very powerful if you use it well in a narrative, because I think Slaughterhouse-Five, I think, was the Kurt Vonnegut book where the man became quote unquote unstuck in time, and like every scene seemed disjointed, but the further you got into it, the more you realize these things are all interconnected, and we're seeing the things that matter, but we're being left to put the pieces together as we go. So I think that's got the potential to be a very powerful approach to a narrative.
Okay, thanks.
You seem confused that we liked it.
Thank you.
Make the confusion intentional.
Yeah, definitely.
Well,
And
I can do confusion well, because I do get confused easily.
And I would add that definitely you need to take English 532 because it's all about observation. And you have the potential for either like an awesome fiction piece if you wanted to write it about what happens, when, but also nonfiction, like the same topic could happen where you write about what happens when these powerful figures in our life squash something. So you clearly had some kind of almost sixth sense, right, of being in that house and having been there before. And as an adult, as Randall said, you're reporting it like, I don't know, but this happened and the plant was moved. And like, I mean, I have reason to believe that my feeling of having been there before was accurate. But even that unsureness as an adult to say, look, I'm just going to report how it went down because, who knows what happens with deja vu. That has so much potential to be spooled out, especially because there's some kind of sensitivity in your childhood that was shut down in that moment, and you're recognizing it many years later. And so you were taught not to trust yourself, and now you're being asked to trust yourself. And that's a hard thing. Yeah. Awesome.
Thanks.
Great. I love these writing sessions. The coolest things happen. But we should move forward because we have a half an hour before I say we try to be done. And I'm not doing a very good job of keeping us on track. Boop. This person's name is spelled the same as our Sarah's name. Does anybody want to read it?
I can read it.
Okay, Randall, thanks.
Or Patricia, go ahead. You said it too. Go ahead.
Oh, did she? Okay.
Okay. Common Ground by Sarah Siddiqui. My name is Sarah, I say. I'm from India. Never met an Indian with that name, they say. Is it short for something? No, that's my first name, I say. It's from the Quran. No way. It's a biblical name, they say. Are there Muslims in India? Yes, 200 million, I say. We thought every Indian was Hindi, they say. A majority are Hindu, but there are Muslims, Christians, and others too, I say. Hindi is a language, my mother tongue. How's your English this good? They say. We were a British colony, I say. As were we, they say.
Mm.
Oh, I love this 100-word story. And the cool thing about 100-word stories, I should say briefly, is that they are 100 words. They're not more, they're not less. The body of this is 100 words. How cool is this? Okay, so speaking of dialogue, what do we have going on here?
Like a
Stereotype
he
argument.
said, she said moment. Yeah.
Yeah, a back and forth dialogue being told completely untraditionally. There's no quotation marks. There's no paragraph breaks. There's nothing like that. So it's more like probably a story being told from memory about this moment, right? A quick question, and I've read this, easily 10 times now, so I have an advantage over you. Is there a line in here, and I don't know if it is or isn't, that is not dialogue?
Potentially the line where she says, "I'm from India."
Oh,
That may be something like, as if this is a, a narration of the conversation to another party. It could be that, they're saying she's telling them she's from India when she didn't say it in the original conversation.
yeah, that's very possible. And the line I was thinking of is constructed the exact same way, and I missed this one. Is there one more line that maybe? And it might be dialogue, I don't know.
Hindi is a language, my mother tongue.
Yeah, I think she doesn't say that one out loud either. I think both of them have the potential of not being dialogue, which seems like she's being polite, like she's not correcting the people overtly. She only corrects them by saying Hindu, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, interesting dynamic there. One, how are the dialogue tags in this?
You can hear her, it's not annoyance, it's a like fed upness with people's stupidity. There's got to be a word for that. Even though it's just the I say, it's the word, the way she, like, I feel she's responding, like, you morons, they speak English in India kind of thing. And I feel
Yeah, I
like
mean, all the stereotypes about India, I mean, not all of them, but they get played out right here, don't they? Is there any other dialogue tag than say?
no,
What was the question?
Does Sarkar, I don't know how to say her name, Sarkar, does she use any other dialogues beyond the word say, dialogue tags?
This may be a silly question, but like the lack of dialogue tags, would that count?
Occasionally there
Like there's a
aren't,
couple parts where she doesn't.
right? But otherwise it's only tagged with say. And yet we know who's talking every time, even when, for the line I said, a majority are Hindu, but there are Muslims, Christians, and others too. I say, Hindi is a language, my mother tongue. How's your English this good? We know who speaks each of those three sentences, right? The first two are the narrator, Sarah, and the last one is the other party talking to her. Yeah, so we have to, I think this is such a great example to say we can trust our readers to figure out who's talking very simply by what they say, by the way they say it. You don't need, you don't have to say Christians and others too. I rolled my eyes in frustration at their lack of knowledge about India. All of that is in here without ever saying it, right? And she's very measured as well, this narrator is. you know, she doesn't like beat him over the head. Is there anything that you particularly don't like about this piece? Or do you just accept it as it is?
One thing I'm curious about is who they is, like what their situation is, you know, what country are they from? Who are they? How many people are they?
What would your guess be for the country
I assumed it was American.
and why?
Okay, so no one bite my head off. Partially because today's the coronation day and I'm still in La La Land. But Americans are morons. Their global perception is non-existent. Like
I'm gonna back
America,
up briefly before we bite Elisa's head off and say there is a global stereotype about Americans that unfortunately does play out all the time when we're overseas.
Right.
Americans will behave moronically. Is that better?
yes.
Yeah.
But it's also most Americans think, you know, it's like the World Cup is actually America. It's not the World Cup. You don't have, other than Canadians, there's no one else playing here. You know, it's people do confuse. It's like confusing Georgia the country and Georgia the state, or, you know, Indians as in American Indians and Indians. They have a very short, you don't have that global European spatial awareness, I think,
Yeah,
that most
and
other
people who
countries.
are from other places see that as a huge fault. It's tough to have an American perspective where we only have 2 countries bordering us
Yeah.
and then 2 oceans bordering us. So having a global perspective is not instinctive for Americans, or wasn't. I mean, now we're in a more global world because of the internet, but our American exceptionalist attitude is infamous worldwide. And this person is writing about it. And yet the title, let's go back to the title, is what?
Common ground.
Common ground. And the common ground is what in this piece?
At the end, both British colonies.
Right. Okay, so what's super fun is how many Americans do you know would define ourselves as a British colony?
Not this century.
So if somebody were going to write about this perception of sort of American exceptionalism, the way we don't understand the world, that literally, and I was talking with my husband about this yesterday, Lisa, people in the state of Georgia were worried when Georgia was invaded or whatever happened, you know, a couple of years ago, because they didn't know there was a country named Georgia. Like, this is not inaccurate. What does she make fun of Americans a little bit? Like, is she kind of poking us? Those of us who are American here?
I saw it more as frustrated with the opinion that they have about people from India.
Yeah.
And she's
Definitely
tired of
that's
that whole, she's tired of that, the ignorant questions that she probably consistently gets.
Yes, and I agree that that's there.
Mhm.
Who controls this narrative? Who gets to decide what went into these 100 words? I mean, I'm oversimplifying the question to then make a point. Who put down these 100 words?
Sarah.
There.
Yeah. Sarah Siddiqui Chansarkar,
Yeah.
whose name I'm pronouncing like an American. Who then it's implied that this is probably some sort of memoirish nonfiction thing because the narrator's name is Sarah, right? And at the end, like, is she relating an actual conversation that happened?
I would say
Is
it's
she-
more likely a composite of
Yes.
multiple conversations.
Yes. Is she probably bringing together like a greatest hits of the worst things that have been misunderstood about India? And then she says at the end, we were a British colony, I say. As were we, they say. What advantage does she have when she writes that? Like, what is Sarah Siddiqui Chansarkar saying?
The last line's actually kind of where I drew my interpretation for the piece as more positive than frustrated, because I think it was her attempt to say, hey, look, there are things that all of us have in common and we need to be looking at that, not at how we're different.
Right. And Americans will probably be mildly offended that she would represent us as people would say, yeah, we were a British colony too, but we were, you know? And so it's lovely to say that even the things that we don't identify with can be common ground with other people. And this was published, I want to say, just a few months ago. I mean, I went out and found this the other day, but it's on 100-word story, which means that, it couldn't have been published any earlier than January for sure. So a story written called Common Ground that goes through this and then takes something that Americans don't think of as a form of their identity very much and makes it the common ground is a fascinating story to me. And again, double the words as the first one, but wow, how much can you get done in 100 words, right? Okay, so without asking you to be as eloquent as clearly this must have taken this person forever to write because it's so tight and so good. I'm still going to ask you to think about common ground. And so the prompt is, have you ever had to stretch, and I mean really stretch, to find common ground with someone? And then just write about the experience, and I mean, I'm trying we recently moved to within like 70 miles of where I used to live when I was a second grader. And we drove past this place and my whole head exploded with, we had stopped on a school trip there and I was sharing with another kid. We got clam fries, right, for this lunch. And I squirted ketchup all over the whole thing because everybody has their clam fries with ketchup, right? And the person wouldn't talk to me for the rest of my time that I lived in that town. And so that would be one I could write about. And interestingly enough, I don't think I've eaten clam fries with ketchup on them again since then, which is fascinating, right? So all to say that it could be something as simple as a misunderstanding from your childhood all the way to you could go political, which, whatever you want to write about. Think of somewhere where you had to stretch to find common ground with someone. And I will give you 6 minutes to write about it. On your marks, get set, write. Okay, you just have a few seconds left. Try to wrap things up. I muted you all. So again, for answering an email while you're writing. And we have 12 minutes left, so we're going to do vigorous reading and commenting. I took my time too much again. That's my problem. Who would like to go first?
I can go first.
Great.
I have to. My muse is not in the room. So you like French toast? No, I don't. I hate it. Okay. What would you like instead? I just want toast with eggs and cinnamon. On the side? No. All of it. Okay. The plate was set down, forcefully shaking the table. I don't want this. All right. Let's just have toast. I don't like toast. What would you like instead? Bread. Would you like anything with the bread? No, I'm not hungry. Okay. The chair had never felt better. Feet pulsing, food steaming, water glass dripping. Yeah, I'm not hungry either. The silence was relief as we sat with our hands in our laps, the sun bathing us in warmth.
Everybody thoughts?
I love it. I love that he doesn't want French toast, but he wants French toast, or she. It's so real. Love it.
That was very sweet.
Thank you.
It was fun to listen to.
Is your muse a tiny person? Oh.
Someone experiencing dementia.
Oh, okay. Yeah, fair enough.
I was gonna say it sounds like my husband.
Anything to add, Randall?
I was thinking the same thing. I've had the conversation you just described with my son more times than I care to admit.
Yeah.
I think it's familiar to people in that you don't explain exactly, like we know what's going on here, but it could fit a number of people. That makes it exceptionally fun. Yeah. Could be one of those short ones. Nicely done.
Thank you.
What a great start. Who wants to go next?
I'll go. Tyler had worked for FedEx since before I was hired, and he'd always been the worst employee. Speed is the name of the game with package handler work, and Tyler was nicknamed the Flash. It was not a compliment. He was quiet and stubbornly refused to speed up, no matter how he was cajoled or ridiculed. Then I became the manager, and Tyler became my problem. I sent him home early, and I wrote him up for performance issues. He accepted it all like a true stoic, plodding to his car with the same speed that he unloaded trailers. One day it hit me like a falling piano. I had never shown Tyler empathy. I preached it constantly, but my preconceived notions poisoned the waters around Tyler's workspace. They were leftovers from when we were co-workers. I invited him to split the tower belt with me, and we talked. He was into Star Wars. He liked video games. His adult sister had a messy divorce and was moving back home with 3 kids. It was making his life hell. It didn't make Tyler faster, but I asked for volunteers the next day to stay over and help. For the first time ever, Tyler volunteered.
Aw.
Nice.
You all and your happy stories. This is great. Thoughts, everybody?
I love the falling piano.
Yeah, me too.
As if
I
you
like it
deserve
that-
to be crushed.
I like at the beginning that you're able to use sarcasm, because a lot of writing you can't necessarily, but with the follow-ups of the sarcastic comments, you made it so that you could do it. So that's cool.
Yeah, because your intonation, it was not a compliment. Helped us understand it, but I think a reader could have too, without your intonation.
Yeah.
Nicely done. Y'all, that was fun. Okay, who wants to go next?
I can go next. All right. I stood in, I looked at him and stared, just stared for a few minutes. I mean, really, really gobsmacked for words. I'm a socialist, he said. We all are. We're all equal pay, equal life. And that's not reality, I say, but it should be. But I stammer, you work 10 to 3 teaching a by mail course. He works 14, 16-hour days in charge of $15 billion with 50,000 employees. How is that equal? Just get people to do his job, he replies. That's not real. It should be, he repeats. And as we circle the drain of our different beliefs, the conversation repeats over years of stress and headaches, and our side and his side and financial woes. And 10 years pass, and 20 and 30, and retirement looms 10 years away, and he panics, and the face of reality hits without a financial safety net, and he goes and gets a second job.
What would you all title Elisa's piece?
I would title it My Stupid Fucking Brother. But
Yes, you would, but what about the rest of the people?
I kind of think something to play off of the circle in the drain idea.
Nice. I asked because of the repetition on the brothers part of it should be. I feel like, you know, should is such an interesting word.
Mhm.
What else? Any other thoughts from anybody? So what I would say is it's an interesting dichotomy between people who have a perception about socialism, which that is not accurate, and people who have a perception about capitalism, which also has its problems, and both of them meet up in this story. So it's an interesting dilemma because this narrator is like, this guy doesn't get it, you know. Fully backing one position, it would be interesting to see what happened if you took on a narrator who was like trying to deal with both sides' problems.
Yep.
Because Elisa would probably like her husband to be home more often. That's all I'm gonna say.
My brother is a brilliant, brilliant mathematician, and he's
Yeah.
got books.
He's written
He's
books.
just so different.
Yes. Yes. Okay, who would like to go next? I think, who do we have left? Patricia and Sarah?
I'll go. The first night in her new foster home, just having been taken from Darcy, her new roommate wouldn't talk to her, look at her, or give a shit why she had shown up last minute. Cassie had mostly been exposed either to various forms of church music or at Darcy's Reba McEntire. Her roommate turned on a song that said something like, I used to have demons in my room at night. Cassie turned toward the wall, silently letting tears escape her heart.
Sorry.
Silently letting tears escape her heart stabbing rather than beating, knowing there would be no more Darcy. Remembering locking herself in her bedroom as the church tried to cast demons out of her mom, scared to death these evil spirits would come and assassinate her in her bedroom, the song her roommate now played terrified her. How was she going to be able to find common ground at all with this girl?
Ooh, I wonder if she does. Thoughts, people. What do you like about Sarah's piece?
The
I
unknown.
like how you were able to bring like that once. Go for it.
I was just gonna say the unknown, like, well, we don't know how could she? So she's got memories that are causing her to be in this horrible place, and she's got a roommate that she's gonna be living with. What does she do?
Especially like the college roommates when you don't know if that conversation would go well or if it's going to make the common ground worse and even worse living space. I also don't know if you meant to say this or if you're fixing yourself, but like the tears escape her heart. I really like that line. So even if it was a mistake, I'm just saying it was a really, really good line.
That was the feedback I was gonna have. Anyone else?
You actually wrote down tears from the heart, and then the line you said about heart stabbing. I also thought that was really cool. And I liked the idea that she might not have been comfortable in what she knew before, but now she's experienced. It's kind of paralleled to like the music is playing off of the different things going on in her life. And even though she wasn't necessarily in a good place, she's now not sure where she is. So like the unfamiliarity of the music and it relating back to the things that she was scared of before was really well done, I think.
Everybody said what I would have said. I would get that heart in there with both the stabbing and the tears coming from the heart. That was, oh, love that. Yeah, really nice. Okay, we have a few minutes left. Patricia, would you like to read what you got?
All right. My husband Gary and I were both atheists when we met. 20 years later, I became born again, but Gary remained on the dark side. He threatened to leave me if I didn't give up God. Once I knew God existed, I couldn't reverse my knowledge and not believe. One insight God provided me was to find something I liked about Gary every day. Instead of seeing his faults, I began to notice all the things I loved about him. I still loved about him. 46 years together and we're still going strong.
Oh, another happy one. Thank you. All right, thoughts, everybody?
That was very powerful, I feel, because I kind of come to that from the opposite end. I grew up in a very Christian family and have went through the stage of doubting and then becoming agnostic and now consider myself atheist. And I went through the same issues with, I live in the Bible Belt, if you can't tell by my accent. So I lost almost all of my friends over it, and trying to find common ground with people and come to see people for who they are. That's powerful. It's so hard to do because we have all these preconceived notions about what makes somebody who they are. And when we look past those identities and take the person for an individual, it's a very, like you said, that many years, that's a powerful experience. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, definitely.
I like the way you said, first of all, I like the way you said that he stayed on the dark side. I think that's an interesting metaphor. And like Randall, I grew up in the yeshiva world, not Bible Belt, but grew up in the yeshiva world and have turned away or left it or whatever. And I like the way that you said they told you to find something nice about your husband every day. Whereas the way I was raised is, if you leave, I didn't even leave the faith. I just stopped believing. Like, you're dead, you're done, forget about it, So the fact that I like the way you said that they said to find something nice to say something nice every day.
Any more thoughts? Yeah, it's such a tough subject. And I think, wow, do you have fertile ground for writing? Because if you have a solid and happy relationship, 46 years, half of which has been different religious beliefs, man, I mean, that book would sell for sure. I think that, and your description's so lovely because the dark side, as Elisa said, says your opinion of what he believes, but then it's an absolute, my understanding of the Christian faith, it's an absolute Christian thing to do, to say, well, wait, my job is to figure out what works between us every day. And so that would just, that'd be a fascinating longer book that I would be interested in reading for sure. Well, that prompt had some amazing results. I'm so excited that we wrote it. So again, to wrap things up this week with all of your talent and inspiration that you give me every time we do this, I need to try to do this next weekend because my husband and I are going to a beer fest the weekend after. And so I won't be here to do it, and then I'm helping my sister out with something the 2 weeks after. So the 13th and the 27th, if you want to come back, please plan for those weekends. That's when I'm going to be opening up Zoom and having. Do you have any questions for me?
No,
No? Are you all just impressed with each other? You have to at least say that.
always.
Yeah, it was a really good session today. Very inspirational. Thank you for showing up. It means so much to me to be a part of all this.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for hosting.
Thanks, everybody.
Well, hopefully we'll see you next weekend then.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks.
Luck
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.